सुन रहे हैं आप रेडियो आजाद and this is your host Ayesha with Coffee Connection. Our Mental Health Monday series continues, and I have a therapist. She's a LPC associate. You all know her as Snehal Kanitkar. Hello, Snehal. How are you?
Hi, Ayesha. I'm so happy to be here today.
Finally.
Yes, finally. Ye hua. Only for you, Ayesha.
I think we are going to give out such great information that I'm going to have you back like on a regular basis. You know me, I've
Yes.
planned it all already.
Yes, yes. That's why you make the radio station work the way you do.
Okay, just a little bit of arm twisting here and okay. So today's topic is a continuation of our Mental Health Monday series, and our topic today is anxiety and depression in teens and young adults. It is a topic which deserves revisiting every now and then because just of the gravity of the issue, and it just seems to be so prevalent, all around us. I think we as a South Asian community tend to be in denial about it, that nahi hamare bacche ko to nahi ho sakta, our kid is not going to experience this. But the sooner we accept it, the sooner we can actually do things about it and actually help our children instead of being an obstruction and a hindrance in their growth and development. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, how to actually identify if our kids are struggling with anxiety, depression, what are the symptoms, are there treatment for it, and how do we go about just processing all this as a South Asian parent. First of all, Snehal, anxiety is, like I said, very prevalent, right? It is one of the most common mental health disorders in the US, and 30% of teens have some kind of anxiety disorder.
Yes, absolutely. And it's a kind of a shocking statistic when you think about it. 1 in 3 teens reports up to the age of 18. So we're not even including young adults in this statistic. 1 in 3 teens has said that they have struggled with anxiety over a period of months at some point in that decade. And that's a really, really tough thing to cope with, especially when you don't feel supported. With depression, I think the numbers are closer to 15%. And that is also quite shocking, especially knowing that the effects of depression can be quite serious if it goes unchecked. Self-harm, all the way up to suicide, suicidal ideation, all that can be the result. And so that's something we want to take seriously.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So that really does sound serious. And we will take your calls throughout the show. And you all know the studio phone number is 972-501-9390 is the studio number. So let's start off with what is anxiety and how do we know that it is something that goes beyond a little bit of butterflies in the stomach before a test or before a performance or going on stage. How do we know that this actually is like a disorder?
So that's a really great question, Aisha. One of the things to remember is anxiety. I think it's something we all know when we feel it. It's that feeling of nervousness, butterflies in your stomach, right? You feel maybe your heart starts to race. Some people get some kind of gastrointestinal problems. You might get the symptoms are varied, and but they are recognizable, right? One of the things to remember, though, what separates anxiety from becoming just, hey, I'm nervous about this, versus being a disorder, by the criteria given in the diagnostic manual, you would have to feel these kind of symptoms over the course of 6 months, more often than not, right? So when it's around this, okay, this is not just, I know a lot of kids are appearing for AP exams this week, right? This week and next. It's not just the week before AP exams of the week of, right? Or when a test is popping up. It's over 6 months, hey, even during vacation, I'm feeling a little bit nervous. For some reason, I'm worried about things that I may not have been worried about in the past, right? So just One of my favorite definitions of anxiety is worrying about something that is actually not there just yet, right? It's a very future focused way of thinking. You're not in the present moment if you have anxiety, right? And that is, can I talk a little bit about the evolutionary perspective of that?
Yeah, sure. We also
Yes.
have a caller.
Okay.
Should we?
I don't mind at all, of course.
Okay. Radio Azad, you're on the air.
जी मैं एक सवाल करना चाहूंगी आयशा। जिंदगी में कभी कभार ऐसे समझ लें ओकेजन आता है जहाँ पे मेजर आपके लाइफ क्राइसिस होता है, उसमें एक अंडर करंट एंजाइटी चलती है कि व्हाट वुड हैपन नेक्स्ट। सो हाउ टू डील विद दैट एंड हाउ टू see the positive things out of that, कि किस तरह मतलब अंडर करंट एक एंजाइटी का जो लेवल रन हो रहा है उसको कैसे करें?
All right.
Simple question, and I'm going through these days.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Shahnaz ji. We'll definitely get to that. So your evolution.
Yes, evolution. And by the way, excellent question, and we can definitely address that. So from an evolutionary perspective, there's a theory about anxiety that it was meant to keep us safe, right? So when you notice, let's say I'm out, I'm a cave person out on the savannah hunting, right? Or just gathering whatever I need. I notice there's a lion in the distance, right? And I know that is unsafe, right? So fear crops up in me. Immediately, what happens? I go into the fight, flight, freeze response, right? One of those. In this case, the fight response or the flight is probably the best, right? But so my body instantly sends hormones which force blood into my extremities, right? So that I can run. Okay, it takes away all anything, all energy from resting, digesting, right? That's all gone. Okay, so this way I'm able to run and I'm able to get away from the threat, right? Otherwise, I'm going to freeze. My limbs will, solidify so that the lion doesn't see me moving, right? Or I'm going to fight, right? And again, that is probably not the best idea, but I'm going to do one of those things. And that from the evolutionary perspective, it's an excellent response. How helpful, right? However, what's happened now, we kind of live, and it's important to note that at that time, it would just dissipate. Like once the lion was gone, you're no longer worried ki ab mujhe bhagna hai, then you rest, right? However, dhire dhire, what might start to happen is when you start to approach that area again, you might think, oh, there was a lion here last time, right? If your heart rate starts to increase, right, without seeing an actual lion, but thinking about that memory of the lion, that's kind of what anxiety is, right? And now you think about we are in a state of chronic stress many times. We are surrounded by metaphorical lions nowadays. And so all this stress, we're just constantly, many of us, if you're not able to prioritize what is really stressful to me, what's not, because everything feels important, then you start to have those hormones running through your body, cortisol, adrenaline, all the time. And you're constantly feeling like you're in that anxious state.
What a great example.
Thank you. Not my research, but yes.
Well, so and you said it beautifully that if you have these symptoms for longer than 6 months, and then that's when it actually becomes an issue. So what are some of the symptoms? What are some of the things that kids experience? What does it look like? But let's take a caller. Radio Azad, you're on the air. Ji, walaikum salam.
And Snehal, right?
Yes, Snehal.
Snehal, आपको भी मैं वेलकम करती हूँ सुबह के प्रोग्राम में। आई एम लुकिंग फॉरवर्ड टू आपको सुनना मैं चाहूंगी, लेकिन आपको मैं सबसे पहले एक सैल्यूट करना चाहूंगी साइली, कि आपकी पेशेंस के लिए आपको सैल्यूट करना चाहूंगी, because yesterday I gave a Gatiya song to Ayesha, and she only took it for 10 seconds.
I see. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay,
thank you so much.
Okay, so what does anxiety look like? How can we recognize it as parents that our kids may be going through it?
So for anxiety, one of the things to notice is you might notice some physical symptoms, right? You might notice some jitteriness in your child. You might notice extra movement. They're starting to tap their foot. A lot of children you'll notice, especially teenagers, even adults, you'll notice a lot of foot tapping constantly, right?
Mhm.
There's something going on inside of them
Really?
that it's coming out through the body that way.
Mhm.
You might notice them um, just simply, outwardly rubbing their
Mhm.
chest a lot. You might notice them, children especially, and I'm including teens are children, right? Finally,
Mhm.
they're going to complain of tummy upsets, right? They're going to complain of headaches. They're going to complain of a lot of these things which you feel like kuch nahi ho raha hai, right? You're okay, you're fine, but they're not, right? There might not actually be something physically wrong with them, but it's manifesting. That mental issue is manifesting as a physical symptom in this case. For them, what they might notice internally is an increase in heart rate, right? They're going to notice maybe a lot of sweating. Some people feel like they get the opposite reaction. They feel really cold. And so temperature changes. They're going to feel that traditional butterflies in their stomach, but it's going to be for a very long amount of time, right? They're going to feel like they want to hide. Sometimes if you notice that your child is just all of a sudden just
Cooped up.
not interested in engaging. Yeah,
Mm.
that's so these are some. This is not extensive, but it's a lot of things you can look out for.
So when they are cooped up in their room, they don't want to engage with what's going on in the rest of engage with the rest of the family.
That might simply be teen behavior.
Teens?
And teens, they're a different animal altogether,
Yeah.
right? And that's something to keep in mind, because that could be also a symptom of depression. Hannah.
Mm.
Depression and anxiety kind of go hand in hand. Many times they present what we call with comorbidity, right? And sometimes they're very separate.
Mhm.
The thing to remember is the teenage brain is very, very different from the child brain, and it's different from the adult brain, right? They're in this transitional period.
Okay.
The teen brain is what is normal for a teen will not be normal for them when they're an adult, right? What you notice these a pulling away from the family, a pulling away from the parents, right? Absolutely normal. This feels, I know as a parent myself, a parent of a teen, it feels horrible. Ki mera bacha, why don't they want to be with me? They might become a little more critical of parents. Little more nahi kafi, let's be honest. They disagree a lot, right? All this, the teen brain is preparing to fly the nest, right? So it's perfectly, perfectly normal. It is in fact healthy, right? It is, if you've provided the emotional safety for them to do that, that's excellent. But it's not going to be easy for the parent to go through, right?
Right. So it's almost a tussle between them still being a child and in some ways wanting to be a child and yet wanting to be an adult, right? It's
Yes.
that constant tussle that is.
It's absolutely a great point. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. All right. Are there different types of anxiety?
Yes. There are different types of anxiety. You're making me recall all my padhai, Ayesha.
Good.
So anxiety, we've heard of social anxiety,
Yeah.
right? Phobias
Mhm.
are a big part of anxiety. So they can be afraid of something very, very specific. We can have medical phobia, right? Blood injection phobia. You can have or insects, right? Yes, same. So, and so many different types of phobias are present in people. And there can be even OCD. There are forms of OCD that are an offshoot of anxiety. And it can manifest in very many different ways, and all of them have very specific presentations.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about social anxiety, but I do want to give out our phone number. It's 972-5019-390. If you have a question, you can even write it on our Facebook page as well. We are live streaming on the Radio Azad Facebook page, and you can call in at 972-501-9390 if you have a question. I'm in conversation with Snehal Kanitkar, who is a licensed professional counselor associate. She's a therapist, and we are talking about teen anxiety and depression. All right. So, causes.
Causes. What a great
Why?
question.
Why does
Right?
this happen?
Why does this happen? Why does this happen? Well, let's look at this from very, very simply put, right? Causes can be, and this is not a very, I always feel sad saying this because I know it's not a comforting answer, but it could be anything, you know? So it could be biochemical reasons, right? It could be, sometimes it's a side effect of a medication that they're taking, right?
Mm,
And I'm talking about both anxiety and depression can
Okay.
result from a side effect of a medication. There can be some trauma, right? There can be something that the child has gone through
Mhm.
that has stayed with them and they're not able to process properly. And that trauma can lead to either one of these things or many different things. And then there's also, you can say, a way of thinking. So some people, and I hesitate to say this because this is not everybody.
Mhm.
I think culturally we tend to put our children, adults, everybody into a certain bucket. Ki, Arey, just soch badal do, hai na? And you'll be fine, or think positively and you'll be fine. But that it doesn't work that way, right? If you're feeling sad and somebody just tells you, Arey, it's okay, like think positive, hai na? You're not going to immediately feel better. So but some people do have a way of thinking, right? Or a particular mindset that is triggered by certain events, and that can lead them down that path of anxiety or depression.
Okay, let's see. We have a caller with us. Radio Azad, you're on the air.
Welcome, Snehal. Snehal, how are you doing?
I am doing great. How are you, SKFG?
बिल्कुल ठीक ठाक अजीब सा लग रहा था मुंह से निकल रहा था साली एकदम करेक्ट कर ली so proud of you.
Oh,
First
thank
of
you
all,
so
let me
much.
tell you, and Ayesha, thank you for bringing Snehal over
Yes, I'm
for
so
mental
proud of
health
her too.
section, and I hope this will be a ongoing session.
Yes, you can bet on
So-
that, SKFG.
इंशाल्लाह उसके साथ ये मैं कहूँ जब मैं टीनेजर थी मैं माने बहुत कॉन्फिडेंटली बता सकती हूँ कि मैं एंजाइटी से गुजरी हूँ बहुत सिवियर एंजाइटी से गुजरी हूँ और उसका एक कॉज था ट्रॉमा वॉर का ट्रॉमा जो था रिफ्यूजी बनने का फादर की डेथ सामने देखी तो वो तो बहुत सिवियर किस्म का चेंज था मेरी लाइफ में तो एंजाइटी भी साथ साथ एक सिम्टम ये था कि दिल बहुत धड़कता था लाइक द हार्ट वुड रेस इट वुडंट बीट इट वुड रेस और इनकॉन्फिडेंस पैदा होता है कैन आई डू इट will it happen what will be my life so incidents in your life trigger certain emotions and hormones that led to that trauma
Absolutely.
और अभी भी ऐसा होता है कि लोगों को मैं देखी हूँ जैसे एस्केलेटर पे चढ़ते हुए जरा घबराते हैं क्योंकि उन्होंने प्रीवियसली देखा लोगों को फॉल करते हुए एस्केलेटर से तो मैं समझती हूँ कुछ इंसिडेंट्स कुछ रीजंस ऐसे हार्मोन्स ट्रिगर करते हैं जो आपके ब्रेन में जाके सेट हो जाते हैं अभी भी कोई एकदम इमीडिएटली नए चीजों को ट्राई करने के लिए जरा सी घबराहट होती है कि विल आई बी एबल टू डू इट सो ये ग्रोइंग प्रोसेस का एंजाइटी तो मैं समझती हूँ आप लोग टीनेजर्स की बात करें मगर और यंग अडल्ट्स की मगर ये तो डिफरेंट एज ग्रुप्स में डिफरेंट सिचुएशंस में मिड लाइफ क्राइसिस में एंजाइटी रहती है और जितना अच्छे से अपने आप को बैठ के लिख के प्रोफेशनल के पास जाके करें उतना अच्छा बेहतर है बिकॉज इट इवेंचुअली गोज हैंड इन हैंड विद डिप्रेशन एंड इट्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. सो मैं जानती हूँ मेरे वजह से मेरे क्या इंसिडेंट थे जिसने ट्रिगर किया था. लाइफ में इंटरेस्ट खत्म हो जाता है, अपने आप में कॉन्फिडेंस और घबराहट बहुत होती है, और दिल चाहता है बैकआउट कर जाने का, यू नो, नॉट टू शो अप एंड ऑल. खास तौर से इम्तिहान के टाइम में विल आई बी एबल टू गेट गुड ग्रेड, क्योंकि परफेक्शन भी आ गया था उस टाइम में कि आई हैव टू गेट द बेस्ट ग्रेड्स. सो ये सब वजूहात थी, मगर डे बाय डे, स्टेप बाय स्टेप, आप तो प्रोफेशनल है, आप बताएंगी, मगर मैंने अपने आप से ऐसा डील किया, अपने एटीट्यूड को और अपने आप को जान के और अपने इमोशंस को कंट्रोल करके, क्योंकि उस वक्त कोई ऐसा साइकोलॉजिस्ट नहीं था या थेरेपिस्ट जो हम लोगों को बताए क्या रास्ता, तो अपने से ही अपना रास्ता ढूंढना पड़ा. इन माई केस इट वर्क, but every time it does require some guidance, some help. And so if anyone who's going through it should consult themselves, the environment should change, and therapists like you know. Thank you for listening. Thank you, both of you.
Thank you, Jean.
SKFG's call brings up two questions to me. One is, if you have an anxious teen, can that anxiety and propensity towards depression actually start way before that, like when they are much as babies or toddlers, or is that way or too early?
So I'm not. What you will notice. Let me frame this question or this answer in a different way. What you will notice is certain babies you'll notice have every baby is born with a personality, right? I know aapke sab bacche, you'll notice they're all different, even as babies, right? Both of my kids, very different. The way they handled the stressors that babies go through, right? Or any kind of distress, very different way. So yes, there is a certain personality type. There is a certain a way that every child will react, right? I don't know if you can identify actual anxiety or depression in very young children, but it is the incidences have increased, especially as they enter elementary school. You will notice these signs of anxiety, especially nervous kids or afraid of things. And this is just but I don't think it can be qualified as a disorder until a little bit later. Yeah.
Okay. And the other thing is what SKFG talked about is that, she experienced a major trauma.
Yeah.
And then, of course, that was a trigger for her anxiety. But, and of course, absolutely justified. There are a lot of smaller incidents in a child's life or a teen's life, which we as parents may not even think it can have such a bearing on the child, but the child perceives it as a major trauma. For example, moving homes.
Yeah.
Could be one
Huge.
of those.
Yeah, it's a very, very big deal. In fact, moving homes is rated as one of the highest stressors in not just a child's life, but even an adult's life, right? Even when you're moving for good reasons, right? You might be moving for to a better home, right? You might be moving to better neighborhood, better school, sab acha hai, sab acha hai. But for a child, that's their world, right? And for them, the perception is everything is changing, right? And when you look at the brain at that point, looking ahead and seeing, all right, what are the consequences of this? How will this play out in 5 years, 10 years? This is not an ability that is developed yet, right? So what we call the prefrontal cortex is the newest part of the brain, right? Evolutionarily. And that is the part that allows us to, think about consequences, logic, willpower, discipline, all the things are in the prefrontal cortex. And interestingly enough, that doesn't get fully developed until you're 26, 25, 26, right? As a teen, that's when the most work of the growth of the prefrontal cortex is happening, the connection between that part of the brain to the other parts of the brain. And that's why it's so hard for them to be like, okay, abhi ye ho raha hai, but in 5 years it's going to be a good thing for me, right? That I'm here now, or that this happened. They can't see that far ahead. They can't always process as quickly as they will be able to as adults. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. How about an event in the home like parents are getting separated and getting divorced? Talk a little bit about the effect on the kids' anxiety levels and depression in those circumstances.
That's a really, really great question. And it's something that we've been seeing a lot more of. You know? Something to keep in mind, a very, very important bit of information, that the divorce itself or the separation itself is not going to be the worst thing for the child, right? It's how it's managed. So if the parents if it's done amicably, right, or if it's done in a way where it is now creating more peace in the household, it is actually, it may end up being better for the child in the long run. If the way any kind of, forget divorce, Ayesha, I'm thinking even any kind of conflict is managed in the home, right? If the adults in the home manage conflict in a very loud, abusive, loud maybe, हमारे families में सब loud ही होता है वैसे, but in an abusive, unfair, very violent sort of way, and I'm speaking of verbal violence as well, that can have a worse effect on the child than, you know, two parents living separately but peacefully. So divorce by itself, very important to note, is not the problem. It's how it's managed, whether you're being fair to the child or not. And yes, anxiety, low mood can be created by there's grief involved, right? When your family is not going to look the same anymore, there is grief, but that is something that can be talked through, it can be managed, it can be helped. But other trauma like abuse cannot, or it's harder for sure. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So we have scenarios now where you have teens who are going through anxiety. The parents, you know, are kind of looking at it, and we'll talk a little bit about things from a parent's perspective. I want to understand things from the child's perspective. So he understands that something is not right. He or she is just anxious, just butterflies, and it's, oh, he's, you know, tapping his feet, he's agitated, you know. What have you seen these teens resort to? Are they going to use drugs or alcohol, or what are some of the other unhealthy coping mechanisms that they are resorting to?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yes, absolutely. I don't think drugs, alcohol are usually the first thing they resort to. At least that is not what, unless it's very available. It depends on the child themselves, on their background. But yes, unhealthy coping mechanisms are things, because what they want to do, right, is they want to stop that discomfort from happening, right? What they're feeling inside is so uncomfortable for them, and they don't know, they may not feel safe asking for help. They may not feel comfortable asking for, they may have asked for help and been rejected. With all of that, or they might have been minimized, है ना, कि नहीं कुछ नहीं ऐसा तो होता है, right? But पहले पढ़ाई कर लो. Oh, if only you went for a walk. If only you got off your phones, right? Everything is blamed on phones nowadays. And you know, I'm one of those parents probably who tries to find fault with social media and phones a lot, and there's some truth to that. But that is in fact one of the coping mechanisms that I've noticed, is kids will resort to this world online, right, in order to distract their minds and stop those feelings of distress from coming up. It's a way of calming themselves down sometimes, but of course in excess it leads to its own set of problems.
Yeah, absolutely. What about if the child or the teenager has chronic anxiety? Does that lead to depression?
Not always. That I've, from what I know, doesn't always lead to depression. Depression and anxiety can exist together, one doesn't always lead to the other.
Mhm.
Chronic anxiety, though, can lead to a lot of different health issues. High cortisol going through your body for this many months, this many years at a time, can lead to this just feeling of chronic stress, right? It can lead to constant IBS, can be one of the results of that. It can lead to almost a feeling of, I don't want to do anything, but not in a depression, just avoidance of certain things
Mhm.
that might in fact be helpful or might encourage the child to reach their full potential, but they're so afraid that they won't be able to do that. So there are some long-term effects of chronic anxiety, both physically and mentally. But when you say chronic, I want to point out that, anything around 6 months would be like the anxiety disorder itself. And then as that goes on, if it goes unchecked,
Right.
you'll notice them resorting, especially when they go to college. There's less supervision, more freedom, less
Right.
boundaries, and that's when you start to see some of the substance issues kick in. Yeah.
Okay. We've also seen kids now, they react to these pressures, the stresses, in different ways. There's some who might talk about it,
Mhm.
there's some who want to do something about it, and there's some kids who just shut down,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And I think that's where, as a parent, that's where the challenge arises.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because how, I mean, you talk to your kids, they may answer something, but they may be feeling something completely different.
That's a very, very good point. It's such a challenge. I want you to think back to that piece we had talked about evolutionarily, right? This is something that may be related to the freeze response. Hai na?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just gonna everything shut down because I don't feel safe. And that's where the parenting aspect of this comes in, right? And I don't work with teens myself because I'm trained in working with teens and everything, but one of the things is there's a lot of bias because I have my own teenagers. But I do work with parents who have children and teens. So one of the things as a parent that comes up there is, how do I help?
Yeah.
That's where we need to question ourselves. It is not, the first thing is, how do I help? Yes. How do I fix this? Right? How do I make this go away? Is sometimes the urge that we have because they're children. We love them, right? We absolutely, until now, we've been the person who fixes everything for them, right? After a certain point, that's not possible anymore, right? Unless they allow us in, right? So the first job of any parent is to regain that connection with your child, right? So if you envision, if I can give you the metaphor of knocking on their door, right? You are just constant knocking, बस वो दरवाजा खोले ना खोले ये तुम्हारे हाथ में नहीं है ना? But you are just knocking on that metaphorical door, checking in on them, leaving time open for discussion. So if you tell them, and I say all of this from the perspective of somebody that has made all the mistakes, all right? So please, yes, I'm speaking to you as a professional, but also as a parent and somebody that has done everything wrong at some point or the other. But with that being said, when we say, oh, I want you to feel like you can talk to me. जो भी मन में आए मुझे बता देना, है ना? But then if they never see you without a phone in your hand, right? If they never see you not working, if they never see you with any just time, कि भाई, here mom or dad are just sitting and I can approach them, right? What are you actually showing them, right? The second thing,
Too busy for you.
Too busy for you, right? Oh, that, or you're always stressed or whatever is happening. How are they going to come to you? There's no opening. Let's say they do find an opening, right? Let's say they do tell you something. If at that point you shut them down, your instant response is, "Arey, ये क्या है? हमारे वक्त तो ऐसा नहीं था," or we've given you everything. Why are you feeling depressed or anxious, right? as soon as you say that, you have shut the door again, right? They open the door for you, and now they're gonna not open it again. Or it's going to be harder for them to gain that trust that, oh, I really can tell mom and dad anything, right? Because you've shown them in a way that they can't, right? So the key here is a lot of parenting is actually a lot of self-work, right? It is not, parenting is less to do, as your child gets older, it's less to do with
feeding, cleaning,
cleaning. Yes. What can I do with the kid or for the kid?
Yeah.
It is more, well, how can I work on myself, right? So one of my favorite thoughts is that parenting a teen actually starts when they are children, very, very, very young, right? Because when you establish that safety, that emotional connection with them, you have so much more influence and authority on them when they're children, right? Young children think their parents are God, right? That changes very fast, very, very fast as soon as those teen years hit.
Yeah.
But if you don't misuse that time, or that's the opportunity to, really encourage that connection with you, encourage that safety, then the teen years, they're still going to be hard, but you may notice some more openings. So I don't know if I answered your question there, Ayesha.
Yes, you absolutely did. And I think one of the times when you to have those conversations is in the car.
Yes, such a great point.
Because you're driving, they're stuck, you're stuck, you're both stuck together.
Yeah.
And, you bond over something light like music or whatever, but then there's nowhere else to go. You go shopping together, you go for coffee together or whatever. But those are, I think, or even road trips.
Yeah.
I think when you can have some really excellent conversations.
Excellent conversations. There's another interesting little bit there with the cars, right? The lack of eye contact actually encourages them to feel more safe sometimes. Some kids do not respond well. It's not I don't even mean that in like a disorder kind of way, but they are, they might be sitting in the back, they might be sitting to the side of you, right? And you're not looking at them, and that intensity goes down a bit, and there's more chance to for them to feel safe enough to open up.
Excellent. We as Desi parents, right? Let's talk a little bit about this, because when our kid comes to us saying, oh, we're feeling anxious, they may not even mention those words to us. With all of our cultural baggage, how do we process something like this?
What a fantastic question, right? Because one thing to remember is kids have a lot more awareness now. Benefit and downsides of social media both exist, but one of the things is the awareness, especially around mental health issues. These kids can look up immediately, right? Oh, my heart is racing, this is happening, what's happening to me? And, oh, I have anxiety, right? They may actually come up to you and say, hey, I have anxiety, or I am feeling depressed, right? One of the things as culturally that we tend to do is we tend to shut it down, right? Now, when we look at that through the lens, a more compassionate lens, even for ourselves, right? What kind of fear does that bring up in us, right? What kind of fear does it bring up in you when you hear your child say,
I have failed as a parent?
Exactly. I have failed as a parent. Or even a second layer to that, right, can be, how do I fix this? I don't know how to fix this. And what do we do next? But pehle to ye shut down kar do, right? Aisa kuch hota nahi hai. Sometimes the responses that I hear from parents are, hamare waqt to aisa kuch nahi tha, right? Or some responses are, you are reading too much, right? Or, you have a friend who was anxious and therefore now you think you are.
Yes.
And all of these things may be true, to be perfectly honest, right? Your child may not have a disorder, right? The thing to remember, though, is if they're coming to you with something is going on. Don't miss that opportunity to connect with them, right? Don't miss that opportunity. Don't minimize it at that point, right? And I have so much compassion for parents, because they're trying their absolute best. with what they know, with what they've gone through as children, with the kind of parenting that they've seen. And sometimes they're not even aware of what might be going on inside of them. They might be struggling with something. But the shutting down the conversation, minimizing your child's feeling is going to be very, very counterproductive at that time. So leaving some room to be open. Okay, even simply admitting and saying something like, okay, I don't know too much about this, right? Can you tell me more? What are you feeling, right? And then maybe getting some professional advice after that, right? Let's talk to your doctor, or let's go see a therapist together and get a consultation and see what that looks like, right? Or why don't let's talk about this every week for a few weeks, right? When does this come up? Leaving the conversation open. Curiosity is my favorite word. I think if we can approach things with more curiosity, then it takes the judgment out of that, right? And it leaves a lot more safety for the child.
I think that's a key word also that you've used, and that is judgment. Because when our kids come to us wanting to say something, our first response is always to be very judgmental. ये हमारे ज़माने में नहीं होता. And that drives them crazy.
Yeah.
Right?
And to be honest, maybe हमारे ज़माने में होता भी था, but it was not diagnosed, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is, maybe we've provided them. One of the things that I've noticed is we have given our kids, especially, and I'm talking about a very specific segment, right? When you raise your children with a lot of privilege, right? And I'm not even talking about celebrity privilege or anything like that. But when their basic needs are all taken care of, and even a lot of wants are taken care of, right? They have not had to struggle in the same way that maybe, we have had to struggle, or our parents had to struggle. And then all of a sudden, so much hits them in their teen years, right? Life is hard for teenagers now. It's very, very hard. The pressures that are on them, socially, academically, all these things.
Peer pressure,
right? All these things, they hit them all, and all of a sudden we're like, well, why can't you deal with this? Well, we've never given them an opportunity to deal with anything. We've never held their hand through a difficult time, right? Maybe now it's time to do that, right? They haven't had that little inoculation of tough times, right? That maybe we used to have previously. So this is all of a sudden, it's not an inoculation. They just got the whole thing, right?
And I think we're also seeing the after effects of COVID.
Yeah, COVID has been the toughest on children and teens, right? Because so much normalcy was taken away from them. Kids, a lot of kids felt really great being, oh, ghar se school, ye, wo, sab. But somewhere in the back of their mind, they're hearing about all the deaths. They're not talking about them perhaps, but they know about what has happened out in the world, the after effects of it, the fear that is instilled, and that can have a very negative effect somewhere in the child's mind. Not only that, but many kids had their graduations taken away from them, right? All these normal milestones of a child's life taken away. Lots of social anxiety cropped up after that.
Yes.
And we're going to be seeing the effects of that for many, many years to come.
Interesting. So now we have, we've heard our kids, and we understand that, okay, this is an issue that needs to be addressed. What kind of resources are available? What can the parents do? What can the community, what's out there in the community, what's out there in schools, that we can work this thing together?
That's, I think that's a great way to approach this, right? Because resources, we're sometimes left feeling high and dry, right? I think there's a lot of stigma around getting help for mental health in our communities. I see that slowly going down. How do you feel the same way, Ayesha? Have you noticed that?
Definitely.
That's slowly decreasing, right? And I think I'm always heartened to see that, parents' love for their kids helps them get over that's whatever stigma that they have been feeling. I think approaching doctors, school counselors, right, to get referrals, perhaps, approaching a therapist. Psychology Today is a wonderful website where you can get, you can kind of filter through, you can even filter through for ethnicity, you can filter through for insurance or location, and find the right therapist for you and your child. You can approach this from a medical perspective. Many doctors will, I'm going to hesitate here just for a second, because I'm not anti-medication at all. In fact, I find it to be very, very helpful. The only thing that is true is that medication, especially for mental health disorders, have been tested on adults, but the effects on teens are very different because their brains and bodies are different. So sometimes the effects on teens for these psychotropic medications need to be, they definitely need to be researched a little bit more. But that may not be your first resort, right? Absolutely, get your doctor's approval there, get their opinion, but something to think about, right?
So cognitive behavioral therapy.
Cognitive behavioral for younger children, there's play therapy, there are, mindfulness therapies. There are lots of different therapies out there. All therapies end up being cognitive behavioral between you and me. So, but there are a lot out there that provide a teen or a child a safe place to just talk. I do have a note about that for parents. If you do take your child to a therapist, in the first session or two, I would establish some kind of contact with the therapist, but also listen to them when they talk about boundaries, right? If the child feels like therapist jaake har ek cheez mummy papa ko batane wali hai, they are not going to open up in session, right? However, you can request that, hey, if it's, something that is going to affect my child in a very serious manner, if there's something that I can be doing differently, right? Please let me know about that. But otherwise, I will, trust you to continue having conversations without telling me blow by blow everything the child or the teen has said.
Right. And how important is it to go to a therapist from our culture?
So there are two sides to this. I think going to a therapist from the same culture is so powerful, right? Because there's such an understanding, right, of the positives and negatives, the strengths and the negatives of what happens in our family structures. The other side of that, though, is that there are very few out there right now. That is changing. We're seeing an increase in Desi therapists out there. I would say going to, if you cannot find or if you're not comfortable with a Desi therapist, finding a therapist from a collectivist culture, right, may be a good bet as well, because they do understand collectivist family structures.
What is collectivist?
Collectivist family structures, a lot of what we see in the East, even South America, right, where it is more for the whole, where it's not all about the individual, right? It is about the society or, the family unit. So you can go to, and, Asian cultures, South American, that can be helpful. With all of that, I do want to say that training in cultural competency has become a requirement now for all therapists. So whoever you choose, whether that is, coming from a Western perspective or an Eastern, they should understand things. They should be trained in understanding things from different cultures' perspectives.
Excellent. All right, Snehal, I really want to thank you. Such wonderful information. And you can write your comments under this Facebook. You can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts as well. We're going to upload this to our podcast site. And you can email us at shows@radioazad.us if there is a particular topic that you would like us to address in our mental health segments. We're happy to do that. Thank you so much again. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, thank you so much for having me, Ayesha. I really, really appreciate it. Such a great experience sitting in this chair and talking about something other than music.
Yes, and that has its place as well. So
Yeah.
look for more right here on Radio Azad.